I got a chance to hear her speak when I was part of Leadership St. Louis in 2013, back when a lot of what I think she's going to talk about was still a plan, and an amazing amount of it has actually come to fruition, so I'm excited to hear more about the next steps. A few things that I have, and then I'll turn it over to Steve Gantner and Mark Walkenbach. First and foremost, we have a December program, which you'll find on our website. We also have, which is not yet on the website, but will be soon, the annual holiday gala. You'll find a flyer on your table. It's going to be at Squires this year on December the 5th. Price is the same as last year, thanks to some generous sponsorship by our friends at Hager. And we hope to see everybody there. It's always a good time. And you'll be able to sign up and register on the website in the next day or two at the most, as soon as I get it done myself. We have a guest, a gentleman named Frank Fuller from the Dallas chapter. Frank, will you stand up? Frank is a fellow at CSI with National Gypsum, and he is we're a part of his territory that he's taken over, I understand, from Thad Goodman. So welcome, and glad you could make it to a program. Yes, absolutely. We have an almost full slate on our executive committee. We are still in search of one director. If anybody is interested in getting involved in any way more than just coming to the programs, we would love to have one of you step up and help us this year with getting things organized. It's a big year for us. We are doing hosting the regional conference, which Steve will talk about here in a minute. But there's lots of things to be done. One last personal thing that I've been working on. I have long had envy, hard hat envy. I'm out on a job site as an architect. I go out, I have a nice white pristine hard hat, it's got my company logo on it, and I see all these union guys, and they've got stickers, and they've got flags, and they've got all kinds of stuff. And I says, well, I should have a sticker for the things that I'm involved with, so I've made us some stickers. So any of you with a hard hat who's here now, I expect you to take a sticker, and I expect you to put it on your hard hat, so that when you're walking around the job site, people know that you're not just your firm, that you're also bigger picture, and that's what CSI is about. So thank you very much for coming again. Steve Gantner will take it from here and enjoy the program.
Thank you, sir. Just want to let you know the North Central Region Conference CSI will be meeting here May 2nd through the 5th this coming year, 2019. On our website, North Central Region website, you can get on there now and register as an attendee. We can also use a few sponsorships or tabletop sponsors. I'd like to recognize a few that have already signed up. Hilti Corporation has taken our art museum sponsor partnership for the top number there. Hager is also a Science Center partner. I'd like to thank them. MAPE is a St. Louis Zoo partner. And AWI, the American Architectural Woodwork Institute, is our keynote sponsor. We have some tabletops already filled up. I'd like to thank Pella, Marvin, Scranton, Sherwin-Williams, Huffcourt, Golderman Sabo, Firestone, Georgia Pacific, SWD Urethane, WPS Wooden, and RS Products for being tabletop sponsors so far. If anyone's interested, please check out the website. We are looking for more sponsors and partnership opportunities. If you have any questions regarding the conference, please see me or George anytime. After the first year, please look for more opportunities for you to volunteer in the Spectator. George and I are going to be putting a list together of opportunities for you. We're going to need people to help us man woman the welcome table for the whole conference, and particularly for the product expo. Gina's going to need a little help there, and some other things that are going on. So we'll get you guys a list and detailed explanation of those roles and responsibilities after the first year. With that, Mark, you're up.
All right. Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Michael. My name's Mark Walkenbach. I think most of you know who I am. I'm the Programming Committee Chairman, and tonight I'm really excited to announce or introduce our speaker, Anna Levy, and she is with Great Rivers Greenway. And as we develop programs in the summertime, we often like to think of projects that are either under construction or upcoming that we can maybe update our membership about. And so Anna is here to update us about the Chouteau Greenway project. Anna is a graduate of Washington University with a master's in architecture and construction management. Previously, she's been a director of construction at BJC Healthcare from 2006 through 2013, and a director of construction for the Gateway Arch Park Foundation on the City Arch River project from 2013 to 2018. So we had Eric, can you? Thank you, with us last fall, and that was a fantastic event. I'm sure we're all going to be very wide-eared and attentive to what you have to share with us today. So, Anna, thank you.
Well, thank you all for having me this evening. It's great to see some familiar faces and some new ones as well. I know that I stand between you and getting home before the snow tonight, so I'm going to be thorough, but get through this relatively quickly. So many of you may not know what Great Rivers Greenway is or what it's about. It's a regional parks and trails district, and we're stewards of the taxpayers' legacy and investment. And the taxpayers are St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and St. Charles County. Probably the largest project we've worked on was the City Arch River project and connecting some of the existing trails along the central riverfront. But all told, we have about 122 miles of trails throughout the region, and we're continuing to expand upon that. One of the reasons we were asked to lead the Chouteau Greenway project is because of the success we've had in our projects. And so this is a great time to be talking about the Chouteau Greenway project. We're about to go public, probably tomorrow, with a press release about what we've been up to for the last several months, and then talking about where we're going in the next 18 months. So the timing is perfect tonight. The project actually started back in 2014 when there was a mobility study done by BJC, and they realized that about 12% of their employees actually bike to work, and that given their growth, they would never be able to accommodate all of the parking that would be required for their staff. So they needed to come up with different ways of addressing mobility. And so one of the things they did was partner with Bi-State and with Great Rivers Greenway, and we came up with the idea of building another metro station in Cortex. In the lower slide, you'll see that was from this summer in July where we did the ribbon cutting. So actually, the Chouteau Greenway project started at this time. We have a whole 2 blocks built on either side of that metro station that are technically part of Chouteau Greenway. You can see in the upper right, that's the Foundry. That is a project that Steve Smith with the Lawrence Group is developing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it was interesting. Steve took a trip to Atlanta and saw the Ponce City Market there. And from that trip, he had the idea of the Foundry project. Literally invited Great Rivers Greenway to a party at the Foundry to show what he was building and said, and you're going to lead the effort on the trail that's going to connect this to some of our other great things in St. Louis. So that started the conversation, and we've taken off from there. So back in 2017, 10 of our partners got together, and these are our partners. Within 8 weeks, we raised $600,000 for a design competition. It's an international design competition run similar to the way we did the City Arch River project. We had Don Stastny of Stastny Architects who ran the competition for us. And I will not be the only one talking here tonight. I've got a couple videos if I can get this to work here. Hello. I need some technical assistance here. gonna make it that much more exciting, right? You're like, what's gonna happen? Okay. There's just a little button. Click the. I know. Everybody does.
We never quit.
We need, yeah, just need audio. Okay. All right, so much for making this a quick, easy presentation. Sorry about that. Try this again.
That's what I wasn't saying the right thing.
I'm a fourth generation St. Louisan. I have children who are here, and I think about the decisions we're making today. Decisions like what we're doing with the Chouteau Greenway will have an impact on St. Louis for generations to come. I know what St. Louis was 100 years ago, and the decisions we're making today are going to have an impact on what St. Louis is 100 years from now.
So as I mentioned, as part of the design competition, we hosted a lot of civic engagement meetings, and what we heard time and again was just how many great treasures, institutions, educational facilities, religious organizations that St. Louis has. And so we put together this really crude map of showing some of the bubbles of some of the great things that St. Louis has to offer. And we overlaid that with the Great Rivers Greenway armature. And you can see how some of these things start to connect to existing greenways, but also proposing new ones, and leveraging existing projects to really connect neighborhoods and provide opportunities to engage. And we provided this with to the design competition folks. We had over 19 entries from 4 different countries. And this is back in January. It was kind of a night like tonight. It was 0 degrees outside. We thought we would have nobody attending the Meet the Designers night, but in fact we had the sheet metal workers hall was packed. We had over 300 people. People were really interested in meeting the design teams. And from that, our jury, along with the Design Oversight Committee, the Community Advisory Group, the Technical Advisory Group, and public comments, tried to distill down and come up with 4 teams that were on the short list. And you can see this real blue ribbon jury that we had made up of folks that are both local and national. And the 4 design teams you see here, on the upper left is James Corner Field Operations. Part of their design was to build this viewing platform over the MacArthur Bridge. TLS Landscape and Object Territories on the upper right. The lower right is W Architecture, who partnered with Kiko Abada and Company locally. And then the design team that ultimately won was the Stoss Landscape Urbanism team, with the idea of the loop and the stitch. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. So these are some images of the Stoss design. No, we're not going to build a teal greenway, so you can rest assured. But the reason we chose this team was because they really worked well together. They had a big team, both local and national, but they really worked well together, and they could relate to all of our committee members, our jury, and we just felt like we would have a really good working partnership with them. So as you may know, there are projects like this happening throughout the country, and you see just a few of them here, and I'll touch on these a little bit more. But what's really interesting is not so much the investment, the initial capital investment. Some of them are huge, $500 million at the Beltline in Atlanta, but the return on investment, for example, the Beltline is 8-to-1 return on investment. And you can see what the increase in property values are. For example, at Rose Kennedy Greenway, $36 million in capital investment and $6 billion increase in property value. You may know the Rose Kennedy Greenway in Boston as a part of the Big Dig. So this was a park over the tunnel. We'll get into some of these a little bit more, but I think the numbers are pretty staggering. So the Indy Cultural Trail is probably the one most similar to Chouteau Greenway. It is an 8-mile trail. They've been at it for about 14 years, and it's a $63 million project. But you can see here that it incorporates a public art program as it winds its way through the city and through some neighborhoods. And the lower right kind of gives you an idea. It's not fancy like the High Line, but you know when you're there, it has a great identity and a great presence and a great brand. You can see here what the Indy Cultural Trail looks like compared to Chouteau Greenway. So Chouteau Greenway is shown in the teal color, and then the Indy Cultural Trail is shown in the orange. So the Chouteau Greenway has a potential of being 20 miles. That's what you're seeing here. In comparison, the Beltline is 33 miles. 11 miles of that is really multimodal transportation, and 22 miles are really pedestrian and bike paths. But they've been at it for 19 years. This was Ryan Gravel's graduate program. Hopefully our project isn't going to take that long or cost $484 million. But what you can see about the Beltline is that it's very diverse. You have some really cool sort of funky art going on in the lower right, but then you have some nice pedestrian paths, some great landscape areas that you can see on the left. And here's how the Beltline compares to the Chouteau Greenway. And then one more, the High Line. I don't know how many of you have been to New York and walked the High Line. It's an elevated railroad trestle. It's a 1.5-mile trail. It's a $187 million project that's been going on for about 15 years. And you can see some images here. It is actually the #1 tourist attraction now in New York, which is pretty incredible. And then that's how the High Line compares to Chouteau Greenway. And hopefully I will get this other video working.
What I'm most excited about in imagining Chouteau Greenway finished is not just the physical space that will be connecting Forest Park and the Arch, but it's the connections we'll be making as a community.
So next steps. As I mentioned, we selected STOSS as the design team to lead the Chouteau Greenway project. And for the last several months, we've been working with them to come up with a mission and vision statement. And this has had a lot of input from our community groups, but also our design oversight committee. So it's a greenway that will transform St. Louis by connecting people and our city's most treasured places, creating inspiring experiences and equitable opportunities for growth. And I'll talk about that equitable piece quite a bit coming up. We also, based on input, developed some intended outcomes. So an exceptional experience, civic well-being, connectivity, economic growth, environmental leadership, and healthy lifestyle. And we've specifically put them in that order. So what does it mean to connect St. Louis? Well, through our civic engagement, we've heard time and again that, again, we have so many treasures in St. Louis, so we started to map them. And this is by no means all of them, but you can see how many opportunities we have to connect north, south, east, and west, with our great parks being the cornerstones. And for downtown St. Louis, the real key centerpiece is the Gateway Mall, which you see on the right. So we provided that information to STOSS, and in the upper right you can see what their initial design concept was, which is the loop and the stitch. So the loop goes east-west and the stitches go north-south. From that information we further developed their concept plan, and that's what you're seeing in the bigger plan here. It's a system within a system. So the loop and stitch connects to the existing greenways, it connects with the master plan of TrailNet, it leverages existing projects and connects them, but it also creates some new projects. So what you see here, if you go from Forest Park and you're moving east, that's a pretty well-known pathway and rail corridor. And as I mentioned, we've already started part of it with the Cortex project. So we're going to extend the Cortex piece both north and south towards the Foundry and the Armory, which is that first orange circle you see. The orange circles represent special projects where we have an opportunity. From the east, as you leave the arch grounds and you head towards Union Station, that's also a known quantity. So it's the Gateway Mall and connecting some of our treasures there. It's the piece in the middle where you see those 6 lines going east and west. That's what we really need to study. What are the best routes along that section? And that's what we know the least about, but we'll be studying over the next several months. So this is an aerial view from Forest Park, and you can see that the Greenway is not a point-to-point connection. It's much more broad-reaching, and it's going to have a much more powerful impact to St. Louis. We have another view from Fairground Park. And the idea here is that there are so many great neighborhoods that we need to develop. We need to encourage people to stay in those neighborhoods, encourage people to move to those neighborhoods, and think beyond those neighborhoods to the region and encourage people to move to St. Louis and make it their home. Think about what we've already done with the City Arch River project and some other projects along the Gateway Mall. From the upper left, you see Keener Plaza. And just imagine the walk from Keener Plaza to City Garden and how delightful that is right now. And what if we could extend that all the way to Forest Park? Along the way, you'd find Steve Smith's City Foundry project. So this is the old Century Foundry, electric foundry. So it's a 15-acre site that you see on the left is what's existing, and then the vision on the right. Similar to the Ponce City Market, it's a destination place. It's an office space, retail, and dining experience. Just south of I-64 is the Armory project that Green Street is developing. On the left, you can see the existing 160,000 square feet of creative office space, a microbrewery, and a coffee roaster is what's proposed, and that's what you see on the right. So how are we going to tackle this unique and ambitious project? Well, we're going to do it in a unique and ambitious sort of way. Really, our focus is going to be civic engagement and listening to the community and understanding what they want. And you know, a lot of these projects, one of the downfalls of development has been displacement and gentrification, and we want to avoid that. And so that is key to the way we're going to approach this project. We have 5 working groups: a community and economic development group, design, development, and construction, funding and governance, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a civic engagement working group. Those working groups are made up of about 20 people, and they will work with the design team and with our civic engagement team and make recommendations to a steering committee. The steering committee will then inform the design team. The design team is going to start in the next 7 months with what we call a framework plan, and that's really a living, breathing document that's going to focus on 4 things. First of all, Greenway identity. So to a certain extent, that's what the benches look like, the light fixtures, things like that. But it's more than that. It's less tangible. It's more about what we're calling the Chouteau effect. How do we brand this? How do we market it? How do we get buzz and hype around it so that people want to be near it, be a part of it, and help it grow and develop, sort of like what's happened at the High Line and the Beltline. The other thing we're going to study is the alignment study. That's a pretty traditional study of corridors, alignments, feasibility study. And then the unique part comes in with the equity plan, the economic development plan. So working with Tony Griffin, we're developing a framework of actionable strategies to advance the principles of equity and equitable development. And with HRNA, we're going to be working on a framework for decision-making about economic development opportunities. Those are really key to the project. From that, we're going to spend 10.5 months developing what we call a lab, which traditionally would be schematic design. But we're calling it a lab because it allows us to test some ideas. Some ideas will be tested with temporary projects, some will be tested with permanent projects. But the idea is that the framework is our control, and we're always going to go back to that control and see if we've met our strategies and goals and objectives from the framework plan through the development of the lab. The first lab will be about 6 miles. As I mentioned, we're going to study 20 miles, but the first lab will be about 6 miles. And there'll be future labs as well. So why take on this project right now? Well, if you've read the news, there's $8 billion of development going on in St. Louis right now. And it's a perfect opportunity to connect and make accessible some of these investments. And I will leave you with one more video.
The Chouteau Greenway is going to be a transformative project for this region. It's going to be our shot in the arm to show the world what we can do here in St. Louis.
So I think our friend Brian sums it up pretty well. So that's just a brief presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
How's this going to be connecting up to the MGA project?
Great question. So one of our north-south stitches, if you will, is to evaluate 20th all the way up to Cass. And we're studying that right now, but we're also pausing for a bit because the city has applied for a build grant, which is the old Tiger grant. And if that money comes through, then we will accelerate that project for sure. Right now, it's just a study. But we will be going all the way up to Cass. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but Grand and also Vandevenner, we're looking at those 2 stitches all the way up to Fairground Park. Yes?
So when did you start this? What year?
So we started the design competition in 2017. The piece at Cortex was started in 2016.
So one of the things that happens in this town, like most towns, is you have, maybe we're going to have soccer down by the river, maybe we're going to have it down by Union Station. Things are in flux. How do you deal with these changes in projects that may happen, may not happen? How does that enter into your planning?
So we definitely have our finger on the pulse on a lot of those projects and trying to anticipate some of them that are coming. That's part of the reason why we're calling it a lab, is that we want to be flexible. We want to be able to maneuver and adjust our thinking with some of these other projects. You know, for example, right now we have a pretty straight path along Market. If a soccer stadium happens to come there, then we want to be nimble enough to be able to tie into that. And so these labs are not necessarily finished to start. A lot of them will overlap as projects are developing and we become involved in them. Yep.
Tower Grove is getting ready to have their 150th anniversary coming up in 2 years. Part of that Tower Grove redo. It seemed to me that it's easy to integrate over 2 miles of pathways within that structure. Are you communicating with the
Absolutely. Yeah, part of our, and I should have mentioned this, part of our working groups also include focus groups. So smaller, very focused groups that we're talking to and trying to dovetail with some of the work that they're doing as well. So there's a lot of conversation going on, and we're absorbing all of that to be able to respond to it with Chouteau Greenway.
I have to confess my almost total ignorance of these things that you've been doing. I've been traveling in and out of town for a number of years. But once everything gets put into place, how do you handle ongoing operations and maintenance and funding so that it will stay, viable year after year after year after year? How does that come about?
So two ways. One is our design, development, and construction working group will be focused on O&M. The other thing is that our governance working group will be focused on how do we put programs and policies in place for exactly that. Do we create a tax district? Do we go through some other creative financing ways to make sure that we have money to maintain what we build? So we're definitely thinking about that. We know that that's a reality. And so we're approaching it two ways. The other way is that we're looking at, from the design studies, we're really looking at materials that are durable, that will last. I mean, GRG's been doing this for many years, so we know what works and what doesn't work. And so that will come into play as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's sort of three questions.
Okay.
Pick them as you choose. The trestle was kind of noted up there, and it's sort of an incomplete portion of the Greenway. I'm just wondering what the plan was for that. Second question, Fairgrounds Park looks like a really nice area, but unfortunately it's sort of in the middle of North St. Louis City, which is kind of a high crime area right now. I was just kind of wondering what the plan was to work with the city to get people to move back there, because I'd love to live there, but right now it's just not a safe area. And then the third one is sort of more facetious, but in a serious kind of way. What about that damn building, the Peabody building, Market, that Gateway Mall area?
Yes.
Is there any way to get rid of that? So there's three questions for you. Take them as you like.
Well, I'll take the last one first. That's easy. So yes, we did, as part of the City Arch River project, did a plan to make the front of Peabody Plaza more in line with the Gateway Mall. So that, I don't know if you realize, but Keener Plaza, we actually moved to the south by 12 feet so that it aligned with City Garden. And at the time when we were doing the plan for Peabody, it would connect City Garden and Keener Plaza. Unfortunately, Peabody went into bankruptcy at that time, so it was put on hold. But we do actually have a plan to connect Peabody and make it much more part of the Gateway Mall. Your second question about getting people to live north near Fairground. We actually met with the Mayor's Cabinet 2 Saturdays ago, and she's very much on board in terms of supporting this project, and actually requested that we look at Vandeventer in addition to Grand, because we feel as though there are more people and more property owners along Vandeventer, and that may be an opportunity to get more people there. And as volume grows, population grows, then we could look at Grand. And so that's why you see the 2 lines running north towards Fairground. The trestle, I think, was ahead of its time. It was a great idea. People were interested in it, excited, but they didn't really see the bigger picture of how it fit in. Now with City Arch River and connecting the Central Riverfront, and now with Chouteau Greenway, I think people are seeing how it really could be a viable part of this whole regional system. And so I think it will come back. Others? There were a couple other hands I saw. Yes?
Me again. Perception of security, how are you all addressing that question?
Good question. That comes up a lot, and we're addressing it in a number of ways. One of the best ways to deal with safety and security is having more people. So programming is a really big part of it. Also lighting, having specialty lighting, blue lights, things like that. But the STOS team has also come up with a creative way of incorporating art as part of safety measures. So there is a plan to have art and sculpture that reacts when people walk by, and so the lights start to turn on. So it's those sort of subtle ways that we're bringing in light, programming, and activation to address safety. In addition to that, I don't know if you know, but for example, at Keener Plaza, the Alliance has supplemented the city police and has security there 22 hours a day. We also put in real cameras that tie into the real-time crime lab with the city. And so we're working with the city and the police department very carefully to address those issues. I don't know if you remember Ruth Bader Park, probably 10 years ago. You wouldn't want to walk through there at all. With the trail there now, people use that to get back and forth to buses, and at rush hour times in St. Louis. It's very active, and it has made it much more safe. Yes?
Where's the Stoss Group located?
Stoss has 2 offices, Boston and LA, and we're working with both offices. We also have about 75% of the team is local, and so they're coming into St. Louis every month to work with us, but we do have a substantial local team here as well. Mm-hmm.
Who are the local representatives on that team?
At the moment, and it's growing, so Bates Forum is part of the local team. David Mason Associates, Lockmuller is here, Alta has some folks here. Dean Nichols is part of the team as well with Civic Engagement. Vector Communications is part of the team. I could keep going, but
okay.
Yes?
So how does your work interface with Metrolink and what they're talking about with the north-south extension and that sort of thing?
So we definitely have representatives from bi-state on our working groups so that we can better understand what their plan is and how we will dovetail. There are a lot of plans out here. St. Louis has done a great job of doing plans. For example, the city just kicked off an economic development plan. Thankfully, we have team members that are working on both, and so there's a lot of synergy there, and we're working together to complement each other's projects and plans. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Sure.
Appreciate it. So next month, December 19th, we are back here in this room for a presentation on Back to Basics from our very own Scott Whitcraft. So if you haven't heard from Scott recently, it's always riveting content. So look for those emails to go out here in about a couple weeks. So, and then in January we'll have Lynn Tenges, the president of AGC in Missouri, to present our economic forecast for 2019. So that will be in this room as well. So no more traveling this year. If you guys remember last January, we were in a similar situation, except we had windows to watch the ice start to form on our vehicles as Lynn was presenting the economic forecast, that we all walked like this as we left the building. So thanks everyone for attending, and we hope to see you next month.
Great job. Yeah.